Welcome to Mental Health Momentum, a Silicon Slopes podcast. I'm your host, Dr. David Morgan. I'm a licensed psychologist and the Director of Mental Health Awareness here at Silicon Slopes. And on this podcast, we talk about the impact of mental health issues on workers, leaders, and businesses, and try to look for solutions as well. And today I'd like to introduce my guest, Chris Cochella. Got the last name right?
Yes.
Okay, good. I forgot to ask you about that before, so I'm glad I pronounced it correctly. Chris is a visionary in developing innovative products and services across various sectors, including consumer goods, education, scientific research methods, and healthcare information technology. He has successfully founded and sold two businesses, one in healthcare imaging and the other an award-winning STEM educational toy called Brackets. As the president and general manager of Basix Services in Park City, Utah, Chris leads the company's efforts to bridge gaps in the last mile delivery of healthcare, collaborating with health plans, employers, and universities. Beyond this role, Chris is dedicated to helping business leaders and teams transcend their default futures, achieving growth in purpose, people, time, and profit. He has shared his expertise through coaching, presenting, and teachings for organizations such as the Lean Startup, IDEO, and the University of Utah. Chris holds an ICF certification in coaching and earned a bachelor's degree in economics from UC Berkeley and a master's degree in physical geography from CU Boulder, Colorado University?
Yeah, University of Colorado.
Yeah, University of Colorado Boulder, leading to research expeditions from the Grand Canyon to Antarctica. Excellent. Welcome, Chris. Thanks for coming to the podcast.
Oh, my pleasure to be here.
Research expeditions.
Yes.
Tell me a little bit about that. I'm curious.
Well, I did it just sort of personal pivot from economics to physical geography earlier in my life. And as a result, I worked for the U.S. Geological Survey. They funded my thesis, and I got to go apply some of that research in the field. Grand Canyon, studying the flood, planned floods to flush sand and build beaches and restore the ecosystem, and then also do some studies in Antarctica.
Wow. So you went to Antarctica.
I went to Antarctica.
That's awesome.
Yes, it was amazing. It was amazing.
I was listening to someone the other day who said that her goal was to run a marathon on every continent, and she says there is a marathon in Antarctica. That someone has organized that so that so people can run a marathon on every continent. Yeah.
Well, I did run a 5K there.
Did you really?
On the McMurdo Research Station. There was a 5K I ran. Yeah.
That is awesome. I'm super curious about the pivot from economics to physical geography, and then you've ended up in something completely different now. What's been that?
Well, early in my life, I thought, well, I'm going to become a banker or, an institutional investor or something. And then partway through college, I started skiing quite a bit more, and then met some folks, ski patrollers, that did river rafting as commercial guides in the summer. That became very exciting. So I did that, and then realized, wow, there's this natural world out there that is so fascinating and amazing. I'm going to go in that direction, right? Kind of a romantic idealism.
Yeah.
I finished my degree, then pursued a degree in physical geography, which involved a lot of additional coursework that I had not taken, like physics and chemistry,
right?
and fluid mechanics and so on. But it was a pleasure doing that, and I really enjoyed it. And got to go to Antarctica and Grand Canyon and rivers across the West.
So, how did you end up where you are now?
Well, being an entrepreneur or coming up with ideas has been something I've done ever since I was a young kid, from starting kind of the small business to, looking at stocks and so on. So new ideas and exploring new ideas has always been part of my blood. Since doing the physical geography and the research, I ended up starting two businesses. One of them came out of the University of Utah as part of a state Centers of Excellence grant, which led to two spinoffs. One I went with, and that was in healthcare, imaging, and IT. After that was sold and I left, I took a break, worked in my kids' school, volunteering quite a bit, committing myself in that direction, and then discovered how little was going on in STEM education. Mm-hmm. So helped start a hands-on science thing there in their school, and then that led to me noticing a gap in the marketplace for children's building and construction toys. Bought my son a toy that was meant for 12-year-olds. He was about 7, and exciting, but he couldn't put it together. despite being, capable for his age.
Sure.
So what was available to do, creative structures and explore gravity. And so I invented a toy to fill that space. K through, third, fourth grade was really our target audience.
That's interesting. One of my grandchildren is second grade, and he loves the Mark Rober
Yes,
stuff
Mark
online.
Rober's awesome.
Yes, but it's a little advanced for him yet, because they'll buy the kits and things like that, but it's still just a little past his ability. So I love that idea of trying to find that fill that space, right, where you see a gap. Do you have any thoughts just on personal experience with mental health or how it's impacted your life? I know you reached out to me about this, and so tell us about that.
Gosh, I could go on quite a bit. I believe in sort of mental health in general, but I believe in seeking help when you need it. I think all of us need it at some point. And personally, before starting a family, I had a bit of a traumatic childhood. So before starting a family, I went and sought a counselor on my own. I wasn't necessarily experiencing any issues at the time, but I thought, gosh, if I don't want to perpetuate or overswing in the other direction as a parent, I should understand this better, and I should understand my role in this better. And that was probably the biggest thing I've done today. My mom was also a licensed psychologist, so I had a lot of those conversations when I was younger. I've since sought marriage counseling. I've since helped people in my family find counselors and mental health resources. So very much believe in training oneself, just like you train your body, or you eat the right things, nutrition, same kind of thing. In fact, it's probably even more important because it's our operating system, right? It's how the rest of it goes, from decisions at work to decisions at home to outlook, mindset, attitude.
Right. I've thought about that so often, just the idea of what we feed our brains, right? The thoughts and the other experiences that we feed our minds. The education, therapy basically is education, it's learning different things about our minds and how they work and those sort of things. And the better educated we are, the more effective decisions we can make in general. So
I love that outlook. It's so neutral and positive. And who can sit there and say, I know everything about my mind and my brain, or even about oneself? I'm always discovering new things about how I behave and my own awareness and space and time and with others. Yeah.
Well, tell us about Basix, the company that you're the president and GM there. So what is it? Why was it founded?
Yeah, I've been working for the founder for probably over 20 years, kind of on the side. I did IT work for him. He originally started the business about 25 years ago, and his name's John Fry. He lives in Park City, and he did a lot of payer-provider contract negotiations, and saw a need in the marketplace to provide or produce resources that were in the non-covered realm, right? We have all of our covered benefits, but there's a lot of things we like to do for ourselves, for our own health, that aren't in the covered spectrum. And it seems that that's even growing. Less and less seems to be covered. And so he started in that. It has spanned everything from sort of dental services that come at a discounted rate to mental health networks, provider networks in certain situations, to other value-added programs. And basically, we partner with our customers, health plans, employers, brokers, universities, and colleges to fill a gap. It's often an underserved gap, or, it's not completely being, met. 80%, 90% of the needs are being met, but then there's this other 10%, whether that's an underserved or just an overlooked component. And those folks want to solve it. They want to fill it. And then, we roll up our sleeves with them to co-create to generate those solutions.
Okay. And that's what you call a last mile solution?
Yes.
Okay. This idea of we've come 90% of the way. The traditional resources have got us that far, but then we need help for that last 10%.
Correct. And, it's kind of an extension of the telecommunications last mile. The big pipes and fiber get brought into a neighborhood, but it's that last bit. If you don't get it to your house, you
Right.
actually don't get it. And so they can bring that in, and let's say you're at a cul-de-sac or you're in kind of a strange extension of the neighborhood, and you don't get it, and everyone else gets it. Well, you want it. And so how do you get that last little bit done?
Right.
And so we do that in the realm of healthcare and wellness.
And it has to be more kind of personal and individualized, right? I mean, not maybe exactly personal, but it's serving a smaller, like the person in the cul-de-sac, right?
Sure.
Everyone on the main street got it, but the person in the cul-de-sac didn't necessarily.
Yeah, it's serving a smaller market or a smaller segment of an audience that, let's say, a university or a business is already trying to serve.
Right.
So they've done the bulk of it. They do a great job at it, but then there's folks not left behind, but just not getting the same thing for whatever reason. And it could be, unusual healthcare concerns. It could be higher acuity mental health concerns.
Right.
Yeah.
What are some of the barriers you've found in people getting access to mental health care?
Boy, the biggest one that we see is access, just availability to the people.
Like you mean not like there's no providers available, or?
Yeah, I wouldn't go so far as saying no providers
Okay.
available. It's often the case that there's a network panel of providers. They're supposed to be there. They're contracted to be there, but for one reason or another, they're not accessible. Either they're full, or they don't meet in person anymore, or maybe they just, the administration just hasn't caught up with the fact that they're no longer on the panel.
Right.
And so
I have a couple of panels I'm on like that.
Yeah.
I get mail from them about every 2 years, and I say, I told you 3 years ago that I'm no longer providing those services.
Right. And, they're kind of ghost panels.
Right, right.
And there's all kinds of other nuances to that. What it means for the person seeking care is that it's hard to find somebody that's a good match that offers quality service. There's a lot packed in that, right?
Yeah.
They have to answer the phone or return the call. Of course, providers are in session with their patients all day long. They're
Right.
not answering phones. They often don't have receptionists. They can't afford them. Often they're solo practitioners. And so how do you get to them? Then you get them on the phone, and how do you understand that this person is a good match for me, takes my insurance, doesn't take my insurance, and all those components. So there's an opportunity there, depending on who we're working with, to bring an accessible panel of highly likely providers that will highly likely match
Right.
closer to the folks looking for it. And it's often those folks that are in a higher acuity situation, need it sooner rather than later, have exhausted or don't have the capacity to do a lot of self-directed
Right.
resources.
In my experience, there's a general reluctance for people to reach out for mental health care. Lots of times they just feel like they should be able to do it on their own.
Mm-hmm.
It's our brains. How complicated can that be to figure out, right?
Yeah, right.
Which it's the most,
The
it's
opposite,
easier
yeah.
to set a bone than it is to figure out what's
Mhm.
going on in your brain. And for them to get the courage and motivation, all those things happening all at once to reach out for
Mhm.
help, and then to find a dead end, I think for a lot of people that then just discourages them, and then
Yes.
they don't reach out again. So you have
Right.
to have, it seems like I love what you're doing, because you're saying we're trying to create a very fertile system so that when the call comes, there's an answer, there's availability, all those things, so that we can time that with the need of the individual. Because in as much as those things are mismatched, I think that, you could go years without people getting the help that they need.
Correct. Yes. So we do that not for the mass, not for the 80%,
Right,
but for
right.
that latter 10, 15%, of a given community, whether that's, members of a plan or students at a university
Right.
or employees.
And some of those, like you said, especially in the high acuity area, these are people that need it the most in that moment, because their issues are so significant. And sometimes because the issues are so significant, they have a harder time reaching out too. So, it's just this whole thing.
It's a bit of a
It's a bag of
feedback
hair.
loop
Yeah,
in the wrong direction.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. What do you think can be done, just kind of what we were talking about, there's a stigma around mental health. There's a stigma around
Sure.
reaching out for mental health care. How do we educate people? How do we help people understand that this is literally like setting a broken bone, right?
Yeah.
No one would hesitate going to the emergency room if they saw a piece of their bone sticking out of their skin, right? They would immediately go there. Yet someone might have the equivalent of that in a mental health condition and think, well, I don't need that,
Mhm.
or I should be able to fix that myself.
Yeah, I think
And that's a hard question
yeah,
too. I
it is
don't
a tough question, and I don't have a silver bullet,
Right,
and
right.
clearly a silver bullet over time, right? I mean, this is a cultural thing. We don't change that fast
Yeah,
culturally.
yeah.
We do change, and I believe we do change for the better. Not always, at the pace we might expect. I really think that it comes from conversation, and that sounds really simple, but it comes from conversation from the dinner table, parents and family and what's going on, and not hiding the stories, and being open about it. Hey, you're down.
Right, right.
What? Tell me more about that. What could you do? Right. And maybe that's, superficial and relatively simple, but that's an awareness of how you are feeling today in this moment. And change comes from awareness, and it comes from this kind of conversation that then leads to commitment to do something, and the action and the decisions, get the results. But I think that in the workplace, I think that can also happen at leadership level. It can
Right.
happen at team level. It can happen at supervisor, to employee level, just to have those kinds of check-ins. And it's not just in one place, right? I think it
Right.
has to happen everywhere. And I think leaders have a particular role in that. And I don't mean the top leader, although, they very much set the vision and the direction
Absolutely. Yeah.
such that that conversation can spin off other conversations. So if I was a manager and I heard my leader talking about mental health, and I'm like, okay, this is part of our culture.
Right.
I feel safe now talking about it with my team. If I didn't hear that from the leader, I'd be taking a bigger risk to talk about it with my team. And so all of it goes to support,
Yeah.
it's like scaffolding,
Right.
everywhere you look.
You're talking about systems basically, and as I was thinking about this, you have the kind of the smallest social system, which is the family, then up to these, huge social systems, all of society or companies, which are smaller than that. And I was going to ask, in your situation, so you mentioned kind of before you got married, you thought, you know what, I should probably figure a few things out of my own, get into
Mhm.
some counseling and things like that.
Yeah.
And you have children, you
I do.
mentioned.
Mhm.
So has there been an effect on that? Because you've clearly been someone who said, look, it's okay to seek mental health treatment. I've done
Mhm.
that. Have you noticed anything in your children? Like, is there a greater openness in your family of saying, yeah, this is okay?
Gosh, it's so hard to say because I can't run my life in the opposite, right? I don't have a life to compare it to.
Right, right.
I could quickly answer that with, oh, of course,
Sure.
my wonderful choices have yielded, way better outcomes. I don't know that to be a fact.
Sure.
I can tell you that I feel good about my decision, and it's something I've reflected on many, many times. And where I think it's helped me the most is to not swing too far in one direction or another with my kids,
Mm.
whether it's how do we do allowance and chores around the house
Right.
to how do we talk about things, right? You can go too far, and then all you talk about is, how are you feeling today?
Right, right.
You're feeling down. We don't all need to go there every day, right? Sometimes it just happens,
Right.
and we can self-correct and heal and move on. And so I'd say that was, one of the bigger factors. Both my kids talk to me openly about lots of the topics, lots of the taboo topics.
Right.
And so I'm really grateful for that. Immensely grateful. And could they do it more? Yeah, probably. I don't know. They may be telling me certain things, but I think they would come to me if it was tough.
And what you just described about that level of communication with your children, I don't know that that's extremely common. I think that's a great thing that they're willing to talk to you about, difficult issues, and very likely because that's been modeled from you, like you said, willing to, let's talk about these things, willing to address them in your own life. And then like you were talking about with businesses, the exact same thing happens, right? If the leader is open about mental health issues, then the managers are going to talk about that, and that's going to get down. And the opposite can have the same effect, right? If it's like, well, no, we don't take mental health days here because mental health is just something you manage on your own,
Mm-hmm.
or whatever the issue, then that creates a culture, a more negative culture towards mental health, which I'm not saying that, like you said, I'm a huge fan of moderate pendulum swings as
Mm-hmm.
well. Anything extreme just doesn't, either in any direction, just doesn't seem to be particularly helpful. Yeah, I think that businesses being concerned about that, the mental health of their employees, and manifesting that from the top
Mm-hmm.
down is really important. How do you manage that at your company?
Well, we're not really large,
Okay.
so we can talk. I think directly to each other. The people I talk to, we have check-ins, and it's very easy to get into the tactics of all the things on the list, right? Where is it? How are we doing? What do you need help with? And I think it's challenging for me, and I think it's even challenging for someone I'm talking to when I say, "Hey, let's put all that aside for a minute. How are you doing?" And I often get the answer of back to the list. I'm like, I'm trying to leave the list behind. Okay, really,
Do you
let's
push?
not
So
talk
do you
about.
push back
I do
there?
push
Okay.
back. I'm like, forget about that.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
we'll talk about it next week or whatever. I'm not concerned about that. I just want, how are you doing? Right? You juggle your children.
Right.
You work off hours. Work's picked up, or you're doing new responsibilities. How is that going for you? Open-ended question, not are you doing good?
Right.
Well,
Right.
it's a tough order to go against the good and say I'm actually doing poorly, right? So if we can keep that neutral ground, I could be way better at it. I can feel that I could be way better at it. So I'm inspired, and I aspire to do better at it.
Mm-hmm. I love that you push back on that, because the default answer is going to be, "I'm doing fine,"
I'm fine.
or wanting to switch back to a conversation that's, more clinical and less personal.
Mm-hmm.
But getting into those personal things is so important, just to give them an opportunity to
Right.
talk about what's going on. I wish that every business had regular opportunities to do that, where people
Yeah.
would just sit down with someone and just say, how's it going?
Yeah.
What's going well? What's going poorly? And then the more that happens, the more conversations you're having with your employees about that, the more likely they are to open up next time, right?
Right.
Because then they're like, okay, I get it. I get how this goes. How this is this type of conversation,
Mm-hmm.
and I know the reaction that I've received in the past, how it's been a good reaction, non-judgmental, like you said, a neutral sort of
Mm-hmm.
space. I think we could probably head off a
Yeah.
lot of issues before they become significant or acute, if we give people opportunities to to check in on a regular
Right.
basis.
One thing I have been trying to do that I've noticed is when I get asked how I am trying to be more honest
Yeah.
about, I'm having a hard day,
Yeah.
or this week is really tough for me for whatever reason. And sometimes it could be very personal, and, it's always up to me or anyone else how far to go with
Right.
that.
How much to disclose?
But
Yeah.
even if it's just stressful,
Right.
wow, it's busy, it's stressful. I'm sinking a little bit this week. It's okay to say that.
Yeah.
How could it not be the case? How could it not be that a CEO of a large tech company is sitting there going, I'm overwhelmed, right?
Right.
Can that be done in a way that increases leadership potential? I think so.
I think
right.
so.
I had
Yeah.
someone do it the other day, different context, but they said, I have a lot of doubts around A, B, and C. And I was like, whoa, doubts? Who says I have doubts? Everyone has all the answers all the
Right.
time, which is baloney, because
Because
we
people don't. Exactly.
And I was like, wow, my trust level in you just went up quite a
Yeah.
bit. And, my whole body posture, my own just internal stress levels just relaxed. It's like, I don't have to be perfect if they don't have to be
Right.
perfect, right? And perfection is just, and expectations. It's just a recipe for suffering, right?
That's exactly
So-
right.
So, how do we just bring more of that humanity and humility
Yeah.
into the workplace? We talk about it all the time. You read leadership books, you hear it all the time. You don't see it modeled very often.
Yeah. It's hard to do because it requires vulnerability, right?
Yes.
It's so easy to put out the perception that everything's fine. We've got no problems. I know all the answers. And I think maybe for a long time that was kind of seen as that was the epitome of effective business leading, right? Because they wanted to look to their champion and the person who always did it right. And I think what we're finding, I found this in mental health over the years, people don't need perfect examples. They need imperfect examples because we're very, very aware of our imperfections all day long. Internally, we are. And then we look at other people and we think that they're perfect and we go, well, I'm falling short, because I'm not measuring up to my peer over here who seems to have everything going for her. Until we realize that she's imperfect as well. And then, like you said, the whole system changes. We just relax and we're like, okay, well, that's good because I look up to her because she's my coworker and I think she's great. And knowing that she has some of the same struggles that I do, that just automatically elevates my feeling of I can do this.
Yeah. And I can learn and I can learn with them. And here we are in, Silicon Slopes, right? And it's all about tech. It's all about learning fast. Well, if we want to learn fast, if we walk away from a situation where I'm not good enough or I have some shame, the learning, and you brought this up earlier, right? It's about education, is not going to happen at the same level, at an individual level or at a group level, which is probably where it matters even more.
Yeah.
And so then it all kind of shuts down, which is like the opposite of what so many of these young companies are trying to do is grow fast and learn from what they're doing, learn from the customer and so on. Yeah.
I think if we can eventually learn, again, get educated on what actually works and not what we thought has worked for the longest time, but what actually works, what's actually effective, it'll make so much difference. So, Chris, it's been a treat to talk with you today. Thank you very, very much for your sharing and your expertise and the personal stuff as well. I appreciate that because I think that was one of the reasons I started this podcast, because I thought we need to hear some of the personal stories of people so that when people go, oh, well, this guy's a president, general manager of a company and he went to therapy, and they're like, oh my gosh, I could do that too, right?
Yeah, that's multiple times for different reasons.
Exactly. Ongoing education, continuing education for life, right?
I'm a work in progress.
That's right. Maybe we need to change the name of psychotherapy to just continuing education.
There we go.
We might get a few more adopters, right? Well, thanks again for being here.
Oh, you're very welcome. It's my pleasure. Thank you for having me.
And thanks to everyone for listening today. Please tune in for future podcasts where we have more guests and more discussions about these important mental health issues. Remember that change starts with you, and we'll all work together to increase our mental health momentum.